Ethan Blackwell was a man who had conquered the world, or so it seemed to everyone watching. As the CEO of Blackwell Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, his name was a byword for success. His days were filled with meetings in high-rise boardrooms, billion-dollar deals and private jets to exotic destinations. To the outside world, he was invincible, the kind of man who had it all. But late at night, when the lights of his penthouse dimmed and the champagne fizzed out, one image always returned to him: her face. Madeline. It had been 10 years since Ethan last saw her, but her memory lingered like a ghost. He had walked away from her, or rather pushed her away, in pursuit of a life he thought he needed. Back then he had convinced himself it was for the best. A billionaire couldn't afford the kind of vulnerability that came with loving someone so deeply. His family had been relentless, telling him to focus on the empire. "Love can wait," his father had said. "You need to secure your legacy first." Ethan had believed them, burying his feelings under layers of ambition. But no amount of success had filled the void she left behind. On this particular Saturday, Ethan found himself wandering through the Blackwell Mall, a monument to his empire. The mall was a glittering showcase of luxury brands, its marble floors reflecting the dazzling chandeliers above. Shoppers bustled around him, their laughter and chatter creating a lively symphony. Ethan, however, walked alone, his sharp suit and polished shoes setting him apart from the casual crowd. He wasn't here for business today. He told himself he needed a break, yet deep down he knew he was searching for something. He just didn't know what. Then he saw her. At first, Ethan thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Amidst the crowd, a woman stood with 2 boys, her laughter carrying above the noise like a melody he hadn't heard in years. His heart stopped. It was Madeline. She looked different, yet the same. Her auburn hair framed her face in soft waves, and her hazel eyes sparkled as she knelt to tie one of the boys' shoelaces. Time had only made her more beautiful. Ethan's gaze shifted to the boys, who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. They were identical twins, their features strikingly familiar. One of them had a mischievous glint in his eyes as he tugged at his brother's sleeve, pointing at a colorful display in a toy store window. The other pushed his hair back, a mannerism so eerily like Ethan's that it sent a jolt through him. His breath caught. The sharp jawlines, the piercing eyes. They were his. There was no mistaking it. Madeline must have felt his gaze because she looked up, her eyes meeting his across the crowd. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of shock and then something else. Anger. Panic. She stood abruptly, her hand tightening around the boys' small ones. They followed her lead, their laughter fading as she hurriedly guided them away. Ethan's feet moved on their own, his long strides closing the distance between them. "Madeline!" he called, his voice slicing through the hum of the mall. Heads turned, but he didn't care. He had spent a decade haunted by her absence, and now that she was here, he wasn't going to let her slip away. Madeline stopped, but she didn't turn around. For a moment, Ethan thought she might keep walking, but then she sighed and turned to face him. Her expression was a mixture of surprise and something colder. "What do you want, Ethan?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with steel. He struggled to find the words. "I saw you and I needed to know. Are they mine?" His eyes darted to the boys, who were now looking up at him with curious expressions. Madeline's jaw tightened, and she glanced at the children before pulling them closer. "This isn't the time or place for this," she said curtly. "Let's not make a scene." "I'm not trying to make a scene," Ethan replied, lowering his voice. "But I need answers. Please, Maddie." Her eyes flashed at the nickname, one he hadn't used in years. For a moment, something softened in her expression, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Fine," she said finally. "Tomorrow. There's a cafe across from the park on 5th. Noon. Don't be late." Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The boys followed, one of them glancing back at Ethan with a look of curiosity that made his heart ache. He wanted to call out, to demand answers now, but something in Madeline's demeanor told him it would be pointless. As she disappeared into the crowd, Ethan stood rooted to the spot, his mind racing. Questions swirled in his head. Were they his children? And if so, why had Madeline kept them from him for all these years? What kind of life had she built without him? Ethan barely slept that night. He sat by the window of his penthouse, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring out at the city lights. Memories of his time with Madeline flooded back, vivid and unrelenting. He remembered the way she used to laugh, her head thrown back and her eyes crinkling at the corners. He remembered the way she used to challenge him, refusing to be intimidated by his wealth or power. And he remembered the night they had fought, the night he had told her it was over. "You'll regret this, Ethan," she had said, tears streaming down her face. "One day, you'll realize what you've lost." She had been right. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the cafe early, his nerves taut as he waited for Madeline to arrive. He ordered a coffee but barely touched it, his eyes fixed on the door. When she finally walked in, his breath hitched. She looked as poised as ever, her confidence evident in the way she carried herself. The boys weren't with her this time, and Ethan felt a pang of disappointment. Madeline sat across from him, folding her hands on the table. "You wanted answers," she said, her tone guarded. "Ask your questions. What will Madeline reveal? Are the boys Ethan's sons, and if so, why has she kept them a secret for so long? What drove her to leave him a decade ago, and can they ever reconcile?" The tension between Ethan and Madeline was palpable as they sat across from each other at the small cafe table. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the chatter of other patrons, but their world seemed isolated, tense and focused. Ethan stared at her, his fingers clasped around the mug of untouched coffee. For a man who had built an empire and faced down countless boardrooms, this was the first time in years that he felt completely powerless. Madeline looked calm on the surface, but he knew her better than that. The slight tremor in her hand as she lifted her cup, the way she avoided his gaze, they betrayed her emotions. She was nervous, maybe even angry, but there was something else too. Sadness, regret. Ethan couldn't tell. "I'm here," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but her tone was clipped. "What do you want to know?" Ethan leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "You already know what I want to know, Maddie. Those boys, are they mine?" Her eyes flickered and she set her cup down with a soft clink. "Yes," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're your sons." The words hit him like a freight train. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. His heart pounded in his chest, and 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind. Sons, not one but two. Twins. A surge of emotion welled up in him. Shock, joy, anger, guilt. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why did you keep them from me?" Madeline met his gaze, her hazel eyes hardening. "Because you made it clear you didn't want this life, Ethan. When you left, you didn't just walk away from me. You walked away from the possibility of a family. You said it yourself. You didn't have time for a normal life. You were too focused on your empire." "That was a decade ago," Ethan said, his voice rising. "I was young and stupid. I didn't know what I was giving up." "You knew exactly what you were giving up," she shot back, her tone sharp. "You made a choice, Ethan, and I made mine." Ethan's jaw tightened as he absorbed her words. She wasn't wrong. Back then, he had been blinded by ambition, convinced that love was a distraction he couldn't afford. But hearing her say it so bluntly stung more than he expected. "So you decided to raise them on your own?" he asked, his voice softer now. "You didn't think I deserved to know?" Madeline sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly. "I thought about telling you. 1,000 times. I thought about it. But every time, I asked myself what kind of father you'd be. Would you be there for them? Or would you treat them like another responsibility? Something to check off your to-do list between meetings? I couldn't take that chance, Ethan. They deserved better." Her words cut deep, and Ethan struggled to respond. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but deep down he knew she had a point. Back then, he wouldn't have been the father they needed. But now everything was different. "I've changed, Maddie," he said finally. "I'm not the man I was 10 years ago." "Maybe not," she said, her tone softening slightly. "But that doesn't change the fact that I've been their mother, their everything, for the past 8 years. I built a life for them, a good life, and I'm not going to let you waltz back in and disrupt it." "I'm not trying to disrupt anything," Ethan said, his voice firm. "But I have a right to know them, to be a part of their lives." Madeline shook her head, a sad smile playing on her lips. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" he demanded. "Why does it have to be complicated?" She hesitated, and for the first time, Ethan saw vulnerability in her eyes. "Because I'm scared, Ethan," she admitted. "I'm scared that you'll hurt them the way you hurt me." Her words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat as he realized the depth of her pain. He had hurt her, not just by leaving, but by making her believe she wasn't enough, and now he was paying the price. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the cafe seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the sound of their breathing. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Let me prove you wrong," he said softly. "Let me show you that I can be the father they deserve." Madeline looked at him, her expression unreadable. "This isn't something you can fix overnight, Ethan," she said finally. "If you really want to be a part of their lives, you'll have to earn it." "I will," he said without hesitation. "Whatever it takes, Maddie, I'll do it." She studied him for a long moment before nodding. "All right," she said. "You can meet them, but we're going to take this slow. And if I see any sign that this isn't working, I'll pull the plug." "Deal," Ethan said, relief washing over him. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The following weekend, Ethan found himself standing outside a small park, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Madeline had agreed to let him meet the boys under the guise of a casual outing. She hadn't told them who he was yet, and Ethan wasn't sure how he felt about that. Part of him wanted to shout it from the rooftops, to claim them as his own. But he understood her caution. This wasn't just about him, it was about them. He spotted them near the swings, and his breath caught. The boys were running around, their laughter ringing out as they chased each other. They were full of energy, their faces flushed with joy. Ethan's chest tightened as he watched them, marveling at how much they looked like him. Madeline stood nearby, her arms crossed as she watched them with a smile. When she saw Ethan, her expression grew more guarded, but she nodded for him to approach. "Ethan," she said, her tone neutral, "this is Liam and Lucas." The boys turned to look at him, their eyes wide with curiosity. "Hi," one of them said, his voice bright and cheerful. "Are you Mommy's friend?" Ethan crouched down to their level, his heart pounding. "I guess you could say that," he said, smiling. "It's nice to meet you, Liam and Lucas." "Mommy said we're going to get ice cream," the other boy said, his excitement bubbling over. "Do you like ice cream?" "I love ice cream," Ethan said, his smile widening. "What's your favorite flavor?" "Chocolate," they said in unison, giggling at their shared answer. Ethan laughed, his heart swelling with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Can Ethan truly prove himself to Madeline and the boys? What challenges will arise as he tries to integrate into their lives? And will old wounds between Ethan and Madeline heal or reopen? The sound of laughter echoed through the park as Liam and Lucas darted between the playground equipment. Ethan stood to the side, watching them with a mixture of awe and unease. These were his sons, his flesh and blood, and yet he felt like a stranger in their world. He wanted to join their games, to share in their carefree joy, but he hesitated. How could he step into their lives without disrupting the delicate balance Madeline had worked so hard to build? Madeline, standing a few feet away, kept her eyes on the boys, her arms folded tightly across her chest. She was clearly uneasy, her stance rigid and her expression guarded. Ethan could tell she was fighting an internal battle, torn between giving him a chance and protecting her sons from potential heartache. "They seem happy," Ethan said softly, breaking the silence between them. "They are," Madeline replied, her tone clipped. "They've had a good life, Ethan. I've made sure of that." "I can see that," he said, his voice tinged with guilt. "You've done an incredible job, Maddie." "They're amazing kids." She turned to look at him, her hazel eyes narrowing. "They are amazing, and I won't let anyone hurt them, not even you." Ethan flinched at her words, but nodded. "I understand," he said, "but I'm not here to hurt them. I want to be part of their lives, Maddie. I want to get to know them." Madeline sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly. "We'll see," she said, "but this isn't just about you, Ethan. It's about them. They don't know who you are yet, and I'm not going to tell them until I'm sure you're serious about this." "I am serious," Ethan said firmly. "More serious than I've ever been about anything." "Then prove it," she said, her voice softening slightly. "Take it slow. Show them you're someone they can trust." Ethan nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. "I will." Over the next few weeks, Ethan made good on his promise. He showed up at the park every Saturday, joining Liam and Lucas for games of tag and helping them build elaborate sandcastles. At first, the boys were shy around him, but they quickly warmed up to his playful demeanor and knack for storytelling. Ethan found himself laughing more in those afternoons than he had in years, his normally stern facade melting away in their presence. Madeline, however, remained wary. She kept a close eye on their interactions, her protective instincts on high alert. Ethan could tell she was waiting for him to slip up, to prove her right about him, but he was determined not to give her that satisfaction. One sunny afternoon, as the boys chased each other around the swings, Liam stopped abruptly and turned to Ethan. "Why don't you have kids?" he asked innocently, his wide eyes filled with curiosity. Ethan froze, caught off guard by the question. "Well," he began, choosing his words carefully, "sometimes grown-ups don't have kids until they're ready." Lucas, who had been listening intently, chimed in, "But you're a grown-up, aren't you ready now?" Ethan chuckled nervously, glancing at Madeline, who was watching the conversation unfold with a guarded expression. "Maybe I wasn't ready before," he said, kneeling to their level, "but now I think I might be." The boys seemed satisfied with his answer, but Ethan couldn't help but notice the flicker of unease in Madeline's eyes. He knew he was treading on thin ice, but he also knew he couldn't avoid the truth forever. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan's relationship with Liam and Lucas grew stronger. They began to look forward to his visits, eagerly asking him to join their games and share in their adventures. Ethan cherished every moment, marveling at their boundless energy and infectious laughter. For the first time in his life, he felt a sense of fulfillment that no amount of money or success could provide. But not everything was smooth sailing. Ethan's sudden involvement in the boys' lives began to raise questions among Madeline's friends and neighbors. Whispers circulated about the mysterious man who had appeared out of nowhere, spending so much time with her sons. Madeline tried to brush off their questions, but she couldn't ignore the growing pressure. One evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Madeline confronted Ethan in her small but cozy living room. "We need to talk," she said, her tone serious. Ethan, who had been helping himself to a cup of tea, set the mug down and turned to face her. "What's on your mind?" "People are starting to ask questions," she said. "They want to know who you are and why you're suddenly a part of our lives." Ethan's brow furrowed. "What are you telling them?" "That you're an old friend," she said. "But that's not going to work forever. Sooner or later, they're going to figure out the truth." "Then maybe it's time we told the boys," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "They deserve to know, Maddie." Madeline hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I'm scared, Ethan," she admitted. "What if they hate me for keeping this from them? What if they don't want you in their lives?" "They won't hate you," Ethan said, stepping closer. "You've done everything for them, Maddie. They'll understand. And as for me, I'll do whatever it takes to earn their love and trust." She looked up at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I want to believe you," she said, "but this isn't just about us anymore. It's about them." "I know," he said, his voice softening, "and that's why I'm not going anywhere. No matter what happens, I'll be here for them and for you." Madeline nodded, her resolve strengthening. "All right," she said, "we'll tell them, but we have to do it together." The next weekend, Ethan and Madeline sat Liam and Lucas down in the living room, their expressions serious. The boys exchanged curious glances, sensing the importance of the moment. "There's something we need to talk to you about," Madeline began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "It's about Ethan." The boys looked at him, their eyes wide with anticipation. "What about him?" Liam asked. Madeline hesitated, glancing at Ethan for support. He nodded, encouraging her to continue. "Ethan isn't just my friend," she said. He's your dad." The room fell silent as the boys processed her words. Liam's mouth opened in surprise, while Lucas furrowed his brow, clearly deep in thought. "Our dad," Liam repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Ethan said, his voice gentle. "I'm your dad, and I'm so sorry I wasn't here for you before, but I'm here now, and I want to get to know you." The boys exchanged another glance before Lucas spoke up. "Does that mean you're going to live with us?" Ethan's heart ached at the question. "Not yet," he said, "but I'm going to be around a lot more, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to spend as much time with you as I can." Liam and Lucas seemed to consider his words carefully before nodding. "Okay," Liam said finally, "but you have to promise to play soccer with us every weekend." Ethan smiled, relief flooding through him. "It's a deal." Will Ethan's growing bond with the boys be enough to heal the wounds of the past, or will new complications arise as the truth about his absence becomes clearer? The revelation had been met with more grace than either Ethan or Madeline had anticipated. Over the following weeks, Liam and Lucas began to accept Ethan's presence in their lives, their initial hesitancy giving way to excitement. They peppered him with questions, some innocently curious, others surprisingly profound. "Why didn't you live with us before?" Lucas asked one evening, as they sat around a table scattered with the remnants of a pizza night. His eyes were earnest, and his small fingers fiddled with the crust of his slice. Ethan paused, the weight of the question settling heavily on his shoulders. He glanced at Madeline, who offered a small nod of encouragement. "That's a tough question," Ethan admitted, leaning forward. "The truth is, I made a mistake, a big one. I thought I was doing the right thing at the time, but I see now that I was wrong." "Did you say sorry to Mommy?" Liam asked, his voice slightly accusatory. Ethan's lips twitched into a faint smile. "I did," he said, "but I need to say it again. Maddie," he turned to Madeline, his voice faltering for a moment. "I'm sorry for everything, for leaving, for not being there when you needed me most, and for making you carry this all on your own." Madeline's gaze softened, her walls crumbling just a little more. "Thank you," she said quietly. "It means a lot to hear that." The boys exchanged glances, their youthful intuition picking up on the tension between their parents. "Does this mean you're going to live with us now?" Liam asked, his question mirroring the one Lucas had posed weeks earlier. Ethan hesitated, looking to Madeline for guidance. "It means we're figuring things out," she said gently, her gaze shifting between the boys. "But no matter what, you'll always have both of us in your lives. That's what matters." As Ethan became more deeply involved in their lives, he began to experience moments that made him question everything he thought he knew about fatherhood. He attended their school play, where Liam forgot his lines, but grinned sheepishly when Ethan gave him a thumbs up from the audience. He cheered them on at a soccer game, his booming voice blending with the other parents' cheers as Lucas scored the winning goal. These moments, small and ordinary, filled him with a sense of purpose he had never felt before. But as much as things seemed to be falling into place, there were still challenges. Madeline, though warming to his presence, remained cautious. She had spent years building a stable life for the boys, and the fear that Ethan might disrupt it lingered in the back of her mind. One evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Ethan stayed behind to help Madeline clean up after dinner. The air between them was charged with unspoken words, and finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Do you think they'll ever fully forgive me?" he asked, his voice low. Madeline looked up from the dish she was drying, her expression contemplative. "Kids are resilient," she said. "They're already starting to accept you, Ethan. But forgiveness takes time, and so does trust." He nodded, setting a plate down on the counter. "And you?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" Madeline froze, her fingers tightening around the dish towel. She took a deep breath, her eyes meeting his. "I want to," she admitted. "I really do. But it's hard. I gave you my heart once and you broke it. Letting you back in, it's scary." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes filled with sincerity. "I know I hurt you, Maddie, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me. I've changed, and I want to prove it, not just to the boys, but to you." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for a moment Ethan thought she might close the distance between them. But instead, she stepped back, shaking her head slightly. "Let's focus on the boys for now," she said. "They're what matters most." Ethan nodded, hiding his disappointment. "Of course," he said, "whatever you need." As time passed, the boys began to ask more questions about their parents' history. One rainy afternoon, they sat together in the living room, flipping through an old photo album Madeline had pulled from a dusty shelf. The boys giggled at pictures of their mom as a teenager, her wild curls and braces earning playful jabs from Lucas. "Were you and Daddy in love?" Liam asked suddenly, his innocent question hanging in the air. Madeline hesitated, her cheeks tinged with color. "We were," she said finally. "A long time ago." "Do you still love him?" Lucas pressed, his curiosity unrelenting. Madeline's gaze flickered to Ethan, who sat quietly on the other side of the room. Her heart ached with conflicting emotions. "It's complicated," she said gently, "but love isn't always easy to understand." Ethan's heart sank at her response, but he kept his expression neutral, not wanting to burden the boys with his own feelings. He had hoped that time would mend the rift between him and Madeline, but it seemed the road to reconciliation was longer than he had anticipated. The turning point came during a family outing to the beach. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the water as the boys built a sandcastle with Ethan's help. Madeline watched from a distance, her heart swelling as she observed the scene. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. As the boys ran off to collect seashells, Ethan approached her, his feet sinking into the cool sand. "You've done an amazing job with them," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "They're incredible kids." "They are," she agreed, her eyes never leaving the boys. "And they deserve the world. They deserve a family," Ethan said softly. "A real family." Madeline turned to him, her expression guarded. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to try," he said, his voice steady. "Not just for them, but for us. I know I hurt you, Maddie, and I know I don't deserve a second chance, but if there's even a small part of you that still cares, I want to fight for this, for us." Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at him, her heart torn between fear and longing. "Ethan, I love you," he said, his voice breaking. "I never stopped, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you if you'll let me." Madeline's resolve crumbled, and she stepped closer, her hand trembling as she reached for his. "I'm scared," she admitted, "but I still love you too." Ethan's heart soared as he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as the waves lapped at their feet. For the first time in a decade, he felt whole. Over the next few months, Ethan and Madeline worked to rebuild their relationship, taking small but meaningful steps toward a future together. The boys were thrilled when they announced their decision to give their family a second chance, their cheers echoing through the house. On a crisp autumn evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Liam looked up from his plate with a mischievous grin. "Does this mean you're getting married again?" Madeline and Ethan exchanged a surprised glance before laughing. "One step at a time," Madeline said, her smile radiant. But in her heart, she knew they were heading in the right direction. Together, they had faced their fears, healed old wounds, and rediscovered the love that had brought them together in the first place. And as they sat together, their laughter filling the room, Madeline realized that sometimes the most beautiful stories are the ones that take the longest to write. A year later, Ethan and Madeline stood hand in hand on a sunlit beach, their sons running ahead to toss petals along the aisle. Surrounded by friends and family, they exchanged vows, promising to cherish each other for the rest of their lives. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale, but it was theirs. A story of love, redemption, and the power of second chances.